The DNA test proved my suspicions right. My wife was cheating on me. I was victorious in court. I walked over to my sister's car, took a deep breath, and felt the air on the other side of the wall. It felt fresher and sweeter. Marcy hugged me and asked, "Before we head home, is there anything specific you'd like to do or anywhere I replied that I'd love to go for a beer. She suggested Butts Bar, and I agreed. As we drove away from the gray stone walls, I thought about what had led to my being there. It had been a messy divorce, which seemed unimaginable on that beautiful July day when Amy had walked down the aisle towards me, escorted by her father. Amy and I had been together since second grade, and everyone believed we'd be together forever. We eventually tied the knot. We were inseparable. Our relationship was a storybook romance, destined for a fairy tale ending. We decided to postpone marriage until after college graduation, and agreed to wait until we turned 30 to start a family. We wanted to explore and experience life before settling down. However, our relationship wasn't without its bumps. We split up twice, once during 11th grade and again in our sophomore year of college. Amy felt she needed to see what other guys were like. Our high school breakup lasted only 3 weeks. When Amy returned, she admitted her mistake, calling her actions foolish. Meanwhile, I had dated 5 girls, but none compared to Amy. Between classes and sports, I never considered dating other girls. Both breakups hurt, but when Amy ended it again in college, I decided to see what else was out there for me. I soon discovered that many girls weren't as committed to waiting until marriage as Amy had been in just 5 weeks. Bev Holbrook was my first. Nancy Newbert introduced me to new experiences, and here Collins showed me different aspects of closeness. Pauline French taught me about mutual pleasure. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that I thought that Amy might be trying out similar experiences. I knew it was a double standard, but I still wished I'd shared those firsts with her. About 6 weeks after Amy decided to see other guys, I returned from class to find her on our front porch steps. It felt like déjà vu from high school. I'd had the best thing with Amy all along and hadn't realized it. I asked for her forgiveness. I'd loved her for what felt like forever. We'd been together for a long time, so forgiving her was easy. When I tried to be intimate with her, she said she wanted to wait until marriage, and I respected that. I wasn't surprised to learn she wasn't a virgin on our wedding night. I sensed she knew, and I was aware I wasn't her first. We both landed good jobs in our respective fields, and the next 4 years went smoothly. I occasionally traveled. I was away on business, but never for more than 3 days at a time. The day after Amy's 26th birthday, she told me she was expecting. I was surprised, as we'd planned to wait until we were 30 to start a family. She explained that medication she'd taken for the flu had interfered with her birth control pills. 9 months later, we welcomed Brian Lewis. Amy returned to work after just 6 weeks. As her workplace had she started working at a daycare center and soon wanted another child. She wanted them close in age so it would be easier to raise them. I was fine with it. So when she told me 6 weeks later she was expecting again, I was okay with that too. In her 8th month, she mentioned she felt 2 kids were plenty and asked if I'd mind her getting her tubes tied. I felt it was her decision if she didn't want to go through another pregnancy. Who was I to object? A month later, Suzanne Marie joined our family. Like with Bree, Amy took only 6 weeks off work before returning, bringing both. Over the next 6 years we had 2 babies and each of us got 2 promotions. We were doing well financially. We seemed like the ideal couple, rarely arguing and maintaining an active sex life. We were intimate about 3 times a week, which I understood to be quite good compared to other couples with children who had been married as long as we had. We shared similar interests and enjoyed spending time together. We looked forward to seeing each other after work each day. One July day, I had flown to Denver for a 3-day trip. I was on a day trip to sort out some delivery issues with our supplier when I found out that the company had been seized by the IRS earlier that day because of unpaid payroll taxes. The company had been struggling financially for a while, so I quickly went back to the airport and got on the next flight home without telling Amy. This lack of communication was actually a good thing because it led to an unexpected discovery. I got back around 5:22 p.m. Amy hadn't come back from work yet, so I thought I'd take her and the kids out for dinner. I was in our home office when I heard the garage door opener, which meant Amy was back. By the time I saved my work and exited the computer program, she was entering the house. As I started to open the office door, I heard Amy say, "Stop that," followed by a man's voice saying, "You don't really want me to stop, do you? Let's not even wait for the bedroom. I'd like to have you over the back of your couch. You're incredibly eager." Hal replied, "Yes, and you enjoy it. The couch isn't a bad idea. Should I remove my underwear or just—" "Slide them to the side," Amy said. "Remove them," he directed, recalling the discomfort from the last time. He only moved them aside. I cringed. The conversation momentarily halted. Before Amy's sounds of satisfaction filled the room, mingled with her familiar moans that hurt me to hear. I grabbed my phone and set it to camera mode. I went into the living room, knowing who I'd find there, Amy's boss at work. How could he be involved? I'd met him and his wife at various company events, like Christmas parties and picnics. Amy had no clue I was back home. I'd left my car at the dealership due to a brake recall and had taken a cab home from the airport so they wouldn't expect me. I got to the airport so they wouldn't expect me. I managed to take 5 clear photos of them before they noticed me, and 3 more as they quickly moved apart. I put my phone away and went over to him. He could tell what I was up to from my expression. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't blocking his path to the door. Luckily for him, he hadn't fully undressed. He'd only unzipped his trousers before starting with Amy. This allowed him to quickly turn and make a dash for the door before I could reach him. I might have caught up, but as I passed Amy, she extended her foot, causing me to stumble. By the time I recovered, he had exited the house, ignoring Amy. I got the phone book from its usual spot and looked up Harold Bartram as I dialed the number. Amy came into the kitchen and asked, "What are you doing? Calling Janet Bartram to share the news?" I replied, "Amy, don't do this. It'll just create more problems." She retorted, "Don't you think so? We've already got problems, especially with Hal and Janet. It's fine for Hal to mess with my life, but I have to tread carefully with his. It's not about that. We should hurt Janet. She's innocent in all this." Amy argued. "I disagree." I responded, "She's married to a cheating idiot, and she deserves to know. If she chooses to accept it, that's on her. From now on, I'm going to make his life a misery. I'll start by telling Janet and offering to show her the pictures. If she wants to see them, I'll consult with a lawyer about pursuing him at work. I'm sure your company's policy manual addresses supervisor-subordinate relationships. Finally, I'll track him down, and when I do, he won't walk away unscathed. Amy said you shouldn't take those steps because it'll cost you too much. I asked how much, and she said, you tell Janet you're leaving him, and then I'll kick you out. I'll bring him into our home with me and our kids if you sue our company. Both Hal and I could lose our jobs without a job. I'll make sure you pay alimony and child support in the divorce. If you resort to violence against him, you'll end up in jail for assault. The best course of action is to move past this and focus on our lives. Are you serious? Move on, after what I've discovered," I retorted. Amy countered, "Why not? My relationship with Hal hasn't affected us negatively. We have a good life together. I've been a devoted wife to you. We have a strong relationship and I genuinely love you. You can sleep with him and then claim to love me. How does that work?" I questioned it. It's true to me. Hal is just about physical satisfaction. He's great in bed, but only physically. Then you cheat on me and I find out. Hearing you critique my performance, I trailed off. "I never said you were lacking in the bedroom." Amy responded, "Then why cheat?" I demanded, "Amy, clarify. I haven't been unfaithful with anyone other than Hal since we got married. You're a wonderful guy, husband, and father. You're good in bed, but how do you provide something different? It's different. I'm a great husband and father, but I'm just okay in the bedroom." "That's what I meant," Amy quickly responded, saying she didn't mean to imply that our sex life is great. "There's nothing lacking on your end, but Hal provides something different that I crave." "Oh really, what's that?" I asked Amy about the size, and she admitted that Hal is well endowed and that it offers a different experience. I replied that size shouldn't be the issue, and that we've had a wonderful life until now. If I'm okay with you seeking that elsewhere, we can continue as before, or it hasn't injured us. It's been going on for years and we'll be fine. I was pretty surprised, so I said, "Amy, you're something else." I was curious, though. "You said this has been going on for years." How long has it been going on? How did it all start? Amy said it started before Hal. It was during college when we took a break. I wanted to explore other relationships. One of the first guys I got involved with he was well endowed, which was quite exciting. It seems that men with larger sizes share their experiences, and this guy shared my enthusiastic response with others I had relationships with. I had relationships with 5 of them, and enjoyed what they offered before realizing I wanted to be with you. This leads to 2 questions. First, if size mattered so much to you, why didn't you marry one of them? The reason, Amy explained, was that they were all self-centered. They believed their size was all that mattered, and expected women to be grateful for the experience. I wanted more than just physical satisfaction, and because I loved you, I left them behind. The second question is, after being with you were with a well-endowed man for nearly 6 weeks. Why did you insist we wait until marriage to be intimate? I loved you and I knew it, Amy replied, but I was disenchanted with men overall after those encounters. I wasn't interested in being intimate. It wasn't fair to you, but that's where my head was at. Everything was going well until a company Christmas party you missed due to a business trip to Seattle. I had a few too many drinks and was feeling mischievous when Hal danced me under the mistletoe and kissed me. I felt his sizable presence pressing against me. I was feeling playful and channeled Mae West, quipping, "Is that a roll of quarters in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" Hal was also intoxicated and admitted it was definitely larger than a roll of quarters. I responded that's what they all say, and how confidently he claimed he could prove it. I was amused and challenged him to do so, and he did. We spent the next 2 nights together, continuing our passionate encounters until he met and married Janet. We still flirted, and our relationship reignited when Janet became pregnant and began declining. From then on, we were always close. It didn't affect us negatively. Amy said she needed to go to her sister's to pick up the kids, so her sister would be covering for her while she was out cheating on me. I asked Amy to clarify, and she said no, she thought I was working late. I asked her to watch the kids after school. They went straight from school to her place, and now I needed to fetch them. Once I returned, I'd demonstrate that nothing had changed. Amy said this as she headed out to her car, staring at me in disbelief. I realized her actions hadn't hurt our relationship. I just didn't know. I thought she wanted me to accept her after her encounter with Hal. I didn't think so, but I reconnected the phone and dialed Janet. She was upset by what I shared and wanted to see the photos I had taken. We arranged to meet. The next day, Janet advised me not to tell Amy that I'd called, as she thought I'd act in a way that I wouldn't until I had concrete evidence. Then I'd confront him. I decided upstairs that I'd start moving my belongings to the guest room while hanging my suits. Then I had a worrying thought. Amy had said he could move in here with me and our kids, implying that the children were hers. I hadn't caught on at the time, but now it seemed possible, recalling Amy's admission about her involvement with Hal. I realized my trip to Seattle was roughly a year before she announced her pregnancy with Brian. Could Hal be the father of my children? If that were true, they'd both face my wrath. I had just finished unpacking when Amy returned home with the kids. She found me in the guest room and asked, "What are you doing?" I replied, creating some distance between us. Amy seemed puzzled when I reminded her that I'd said I'd show her that nothing had changed. Did she forget what she'd seen just 2 hours ago? I don't think she realizes how much this bothers me. Fine, I'll shower first. You're missing the point. Amy said, "I don't want anything to do with your affair. You're overreacting, Rob. I don't love Hal the way I love you. We have physical relations, but we make love." Amy said, "I don't want you to leave and let Hal move in." There wasn't much love. During the divorce talk, Amy said I didn't mean it. "I just wanted you to think before calling Janet." I replied that I did think it over. "Amy, we're adults. We can discuss this, but I need space. Nothing has changed. I still love you, but I'm not going to stop cheating." I left to spend time with the kids, helping them with homework and playing until bedtime. Later, I settled into my new room. I heard the shower and thought about what Amy said. "It's never bothered you before." I was drifting off to sleep when Amy came in. I walked into the room and felt her attempt to embrace me. I sat up abruptly, pushing her away so forcefully that she tumbled off the bed. "What part of, I want nothing to do with your affair, don't you understand?" "Stay away from me. Amy. Rob, I love you. We can find a way through this, Amy pleaded. I replied firmly, It's not possible, Amy. There's no chance. She left the room and I tried to sleep. The night was restless, leaving me groggy by morning. Amy had prepared breakfast, but I ignored her. Grabbed my car keys and left for breakfast at a local restaurant before heading to work at 10. I called Mike Cooper, a trusted lawyer and friend, to go over my situation and talk about divorce. He said he'd meet me at Bub's bar at 5. By 12 noon, I had connected my phone to the computer, transferred the photos of Amy and Bartram, printed 3 sets and placed them in envelopes. When I arrived at Mario's, Janet was already there, rising to greet me. We chatted casually for a while, and then I said, I wish our meeting was under better circumstances. I told her what had happened the day before. I gave her the envelope with the photos in it. She looked at them calmly and then gave them back to me. She asked if I was going to get a divorce. I said that I might do that. This isn't the first time he's done this, because of his size. I forgave him once, but I warned him it would be the last. You might not have the chance to kick him out. I'll keep an eye on him, and when I find him, he won't get off lightly. She suggested putting him in the hospital and moving his belongings there if you do catch him. Give him a few kicks for me, she added. I agreed, and we left. My discussion with Mike confirmed my suspicions. In our state's no-fault system, assets would be divided evenly. Amy would get custody, and I'd be responsible for child support. Our incomes were similar, so I wouldn't owe alimony or separate maintenance. As for maintenance, in our state, the court is concerned about the children's paternity. Mike advised a DNA test and gave him 2 sets of photos. I requested legal action against Bartram for alienation of affections and against their workplace for neglecting their policy against relationships between supervisors and subordinates. This could, Mike said, that if we went ahead, it would put Amy's job at risk and increase our financial obligations. I was aware of this, but I insisted we cover a few more topics. Mike advised against leaving the house and giving Amy control with the kids involved. He suggested trying to coexist until the divorce process clarified and the court issued guidelines. The court can decide who stays and who goes, but remember that courts here often favor the wife, especially when children are involved. It could be a tough road ahead. Mike warned me when I returned home that Amy wasn't pleased. You had to tell Janet, didn't you? We could have worked it out, but you involved her. She said you'd kicked him out, but I told her it wasn't my fault. Amy, it's because of what you and he did. I'm sorry she kicked him out because it'll make it harder to find him. When I do find him, I'll make sure his prized possession isn't working for a while. That night, while everyone else was asleep, I got up at 3, it's 0:00 a.m. Morning, I left the samples at a nearby lab on my way to work and offered extra payment for expedited testing. Amy's words kept ringing in my ears. Just remember that I warned you. Rob stuck with me. I was at the bank when the lobby doors opened at 9. I emptied all our safe deposit boxes and went to another bank down the street to open an account in my name. I knew I'd have to explain this during the divorce, but it meant I could cover the house payments and take care of the kids back at work. I had another idea. I canceled all our joint credit cards to stop Amy from running up cash advance balances. This proactive approach proved crucial. When I got back home that evening, a man handed me an envelope saying, "You've been served. You should move at least 500 feet from this house due to a temporary restraining order." I looked inside the envelope and saw that I couldn't come within 500 feet of the house, Amy or the kids. Amy's lawyer had acted quickly, unlike Mike's, but neither of us had anticipated the urgency. As I looked up, Amy smirked from the eye, backed the car out, and drove to the corner to call Mike after updating him. I asked how to retrieve my belongings. He mentioned having contacts in the sheriff's department and promised to check, then call me back. While we were on the phone, I told him to change the grounds of the divorce from irreconcilable differences to infidelity and to pursue legal action against Bartram and Amy's company. I told Mike to make sure they paid up. He called me back within 15 minutes to say that 2 deputies would be there in the next 30 minutes to help me get into the house. Until the court made further arrangements, though, I could only get my clothes and toiletries. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived at the house. I started my car and parked behind them. The deputies introduced themselves and told me to wait for their signal before approaching. They then went up to the house and rang the bell. Amy answered. After a quick chat, the deputies gave me the signal to come over. They reminded me I could only take my clothes and toiletries. They then led me inside, and on my way to the stairs I checked on the kids. They were nowhere to be seen, but Hal was there, sitting with a beer that I had bought despite my anger. I didn't confront him with the deputy's presence as we headed upstairs. Amy stood in the doorway watching me pack. I couldn't resist saying something, even though I didn't look at her. Amy, you really messed up this time. I thought about our relationship all day at the office and realized we couldn't resolve our issues. You'd said you loved me, Amy. I said, emotional misuse, restraining order. Our chances are gone. Think about it. We were close to making it work, but you messed it up. How did drinking my beer in the kitchen seal the deal? I closed my suitcase, turned and left the house the following day. Amy called me at. I'd like to discuss what you said last night. No way, Amy. Your actions yesterday, combined with letting me see you in the house you barred me from, ended it and dashed any hope for us. I can't meet and talk with you. Remember the 500T restriction. Goodbye, Amy. 2 days later, I returned to the house with 2 court-appointed supervisors to oversee my belongings removal. Throughout, Amy persisted in asking me to talk, but I brushed her off until I was loading the final items into the I went into the bedroom and told her we could fix things if I'd communicated. I beckoned her over and pointed to the master bathroom counter. Her expression dropped. There lay men's toiletries that weren't mine. Goodbye, Amy. Just know you brought this on yourself, and it could have been prevented. After that, things happened quickly. Amy received legal papers at her workplace. They accused her of infidelity. Hal also faced a lawsuit. He was accused of causing the breakdown of our marriage. Additionally, their employer was taken to court. They were accused of neglecting to enforce their guidelines. These guidelines prohibit relationships between supervisors and their subordinates. 3 days later, both Hal and Amy lost their jobs. Amy's boss was the one who got fired. She said that he'd threatened her job security if she didn't do what he wanted. The company didn't believe her, so they let him go. After that, Amy sued them for wrongful dismissal. Throughout these legal battles, Amy and Hal continued to live in our home. 3 weeks after the hearing, we went to a hearing to extend the temporary restraining order. The judge rejected the request and reprimanded Amy's attorney for even submitting it a week later. We attended the initial divorce hearing. Mike warned me that the odds weren't in my favor. They'll likely grant Amy temporary custody of the kids and exclusive use of the house until the divorce terms are finalized. You'll still need to cover the mortgage, and you might also have to pay for utilities, and you could get hit with temporary alimony and child support. Your lawyer is pushing to get the money you took out of the accounts back. I expect the judge will look at that when he makes his decision. I gave him an envelope and said this could affect the child support. After he read it, Mike said, "Damn, Bob. I'm really sorry. Do you know who the biological father might be? I'd guess it's him, but it might not affect this first hearing, since Child Protection Services will want to check the documents. It will definitely affect the final divorce settlement. I'll get to speak, but choose your words wisely." The hearing went pretty much as Mike predicted. Amy was granted temporary custody of the house and the kids, along with interim alimony. I was told to pay Amy half of the withdrawn amounts from our current and savings accounts, but a few of the certificates of deposit got lost. I didn't bring them up because I was trying to get through the cracks. Amy's attorney asked me to cover his fees, but Mike got involved. This isn't a typical divorce scenario where my client is sued and his wife responds. She started the action against my client, so she should pay her own legal expenses. The judge ruled in our favor on that issue, and I couldn't help but smile when, based on advice from Child Protective Services, he set the child support amount. Mike objected and provided the DNA test proving I wasn't the kid's biological father. I was directed to pay interim child support pending CPS verification. If the documents are correct, any support I've paid will be deducted from my wife's share of the settlement. I kept an eye on Amy when Mike raised the kid's paternity, and she didn't seem surprised. She'd known all along about the house. The judge asked if I understood the court's orders. I'd like to see the ruling, but I'd also like to understand the reasoning behind it. Why has my unfaithful wife been granted custody of our children? Is it beneficial for them to live with a woman who moved in with her lover on the same day she filed for divorce? What kind of example does that set? We haven't even been apart for 6 weeks, and she already has another man in the house. Plus, why should I maintain a home for the man my wife cheated with? The judge simply instructed CPS to investigate my claims and report back within 10 days as we exited the courtroom. Amy approached me saying, "How could you do this to your kids? They aren't mine." Amy, your reaction to Mike was also interesting. Mentioning the DNA test was all it took. You weren't surprised. You've known all along. Just another debt I owe you. Sure, whatever. Just ensure I get the money tomorrow. She walked off, unbeknownst to her. Getting a cent of that money soon wasn't likely. I thought I could delay payment for weeks before facing potential consequences. I could probably hold off for another week or two, even then. The day after the hearing, Mike called to tell me that Amy's former employer had made a settlement offer. It's not as good as we could get, so I'll leave it to you to decide since you're more knowledgeable about these matters. To be honest, my original lawsuit against them was mainly to get back at Amy and Bartram. I'm happy knowing they lost their jobs. Also, we shouldn't expect much from Bartram, especially now that he's unemployed. Whatever he manages to get together will likely go to his ex. Keep the pressure on him and make him cover his legal fees. If we win, we can secure a judgment against him, which will be a constant reminder of his actions. Mike mentioned that he might have to pay alimony, which reminded me that I hadn't spoken to Janet recently. I reached out and asked about her situation. Things aren't great. It's tough with Hal unemployed and not meeting his court-ordered payments. I've ordered payments, but I withdrew funds from our accounts before kicking him out. I hate to say it, but things might get worse. It turns out that both my kids are Hal's biological children, so he'll likely owe Amy child support once my divorce is finalized. Or perhaps not, given that they're living together. I wasn't aware of how your case against Hal's former employer is going. I don't have a case against them, so I don't see why I would. I clarified the situation, and she appreciated the heads up, saying she'd consult her attorney about it. I added that if you need any help, just let me know. I hope you're not implying what I think you are. Just because of what Amy did doesn't mean I'd do the same to you for revenge. That's a terrible assumption to make. I'm sorry to have bothered you, I said before ending. Her final remarks left me feeling pretty annoyed. They kept me in a bad mood all day. By the time I finished work, I was eager to confront Hal. I figured he'd be job hunting since he was unemployed. I took the next day off and parked my car up the street from the house at 6000A. Morning. I'll be waiting for the kids to leave for school at 7:20. Hal's Chevy Blazer came out of my garage and drove down the street. I followed him to a parking garage in the city center, where he parked a few spaces away. I stepped out, crouched down, and positioned myself between him and the elevator. When he reached my spot, I stood up and said hello. "Good morning, Hal. It's a good one for me, but I can't say the same for you." He tried to escape, but I caught him and spun him around. I then pushed him against a concrete pillar and physically assaulted him, finishing with 6 forceful kicks to his groin. I left him on the ground groaning in pain. The next day, 2 police officers arrived at my workplace and arrested me for assault and battery. I spent the night in jail and appeared before a judge the next day after hearing the charges. I pleaded not guilty. The judge asked, "Are you certain you want to plead not guilty? Mr. Bartram is quite convinced you attacked him." I did confront him, yes, but I don't consider it assault and battery. So what would you label it? Delivering justice. I don't get your perspective. If he had been mine, he would have had to face the consequences. That might be true, but in this state, infidelity isn't illegal. That's why I took matters into my own hands. I'm not interested in the law. I believe the legal system falls short in cases like mine. My wife has been unfaithful to me for years, leaving me responsible for her lover's children. What do the courts do? They favor her. She keeps the house, and I'm ordered to pay the bills while she moves her lover in. I'm left paying for his living. She'll get half of everything she gained through deceit when the divorce is finalized. The courts favor her, which is unfair to me. I'm the one getting the short end of the stick from the same legal system you're praising. If the law won't be fair to me, I'll have to take matters into my own hands. You did break the law, and you've acknowledged that yourself. No, I haven't. I'm admitting to pursuing justice. I'm entitled to a jury trial, and I'm prepared to present my case. However, I won't let the court's resources be wasted on this trial. You admitted to stomping on his groin, so I have to find you guilty and sentence you to 6 months in the Fairmont County facility. Thank you. Excuse me. You've actually helped me find justice regarding my wife. For those 6 months, she won't receive any alimony or child support. I won't be making the house. She's lost her job, so she can't afford the mortgage. The house will foreclose, leaving her and her lover without a place. I'm going to jail, so I won't be able to pay her when I'm released. Thanks for sacrificing your home's equity. We took out a second mortgage for central air and a pool. Selling it wouldn't yield much after costs. Maybe a couple of thousand split between us. I'd rather she lose. I wouldn't see any of it anyway. By the time I'm out, I'll owe 6 months of back alimony. I'm sure the legal system would redirect any proceeds to cover that debt. The judge simply shook his head. I served 4 months in county jail. Mike visited me weekly. During his third visit, he mentioned a settlement offer from Amy's former employer. I told him to accept it, cash the check immediately, and keep the funds away from Amy. A surprise came at the end of. When Amy showed up to see me in jail, they only allow approved visitors. You provide a list of acceptable visitors, and they check with you if someone not on the list wants to visit. Amy wasn't on my list, but I was curious enough to agree. Sitting across from her, separated by the partition, Amy smirked and said, "Orange isn't your color. I'm limited to what I can wear here." "What do you need, Amy?" "I need you to sort out some money for me. The mortgage and the utilities are due, and I've had no luck finding work. It's hard to feed the kids if your partner had just taken the beating for messing with my wife instead of pressing charges. I wouldn't be here and your financial situation wouldn't be this dire if he hadn't done that. He's the reason I'm in here. So take your money issues to him. When it comes to providing for the kids, he's the one who should be taking care of them." "How can you say that?" "Yes, he's biologically related to them. But you've been their dad from day one. They don't know anything about hell. They only know he's in our home while you're still married to me. I'm saying you're their real dad, Rob. You've been there for them since the beginning, loving them unconditionally. You found out about Hal and me after you'd already been there for them. You can't just switch off that love for them, Rob. They're innocent in all of this. If you're angry, direct it at me, not them. The issue is if I give you money for food, it won't just feed the kids, it'll also support you and Bartram. I could never damage you the way I did Bartram, but I wouldn't feel bad watching both of you struggle. You're not concerned that we'll lose the house without your help. You mean the house you kicked me out of. It's the one you shared with your lover, since Bartram's now the man of your house. He should be contributing. You need to try harder to find a job, Amy. You should also push Bartram to do the same. Janet's having trouble finding work, and whatever little he manages to earn, she takes a good share of it. At least he's got that impressive tool you're so infatuated with, so it's not a complete loss for you. That's Rich. Rob hasn't been all that impressive since you confronted him. Well, Amy, I'm so sorry I disrupted your life. You know what they say about life being tough." I stood up and left. My sister Megan was my only regular visitor. She saw me once a week during one of her. About 3 weeks ago, Megan said that Amy had asked her to ask you for money for the kids. Amy said she'd only use it for them. You might want to think about it, Rob. I hate to see the kids struggling. Megan's plan is to get full custody when I'm out. She wants to prove that she can't take care of them, especially with her living with Bartram. If she and her biological father can't even take care of them, what makes you think you can? I also mentioned that I want custody, even though Bartram is their biological father. This shows how much I care about them. I don't think helping Amy would be the best solution, as I don't trust her. After all, she deceived me with a smile for over 6 years. I'm not sure I can believe anything she says. Would you be upset if I helped them? I'm currently in jail, Megan. I can't stop you from doing what you think is right. I told her that Megan did assist them, but not financially. She bought clothes for the kids and occasionally delivered groceries from her to them. I found out that Amy had got a good job, but things weren't going well at home. Bartram had given up looking for work because he felt the jobs on offer were beneath him or didn't pay enough, based on what he told the kids during visits. Megan found out that Bartram and Amy often argued about his laziness at home. Hearing this made me feel a bit better. During my 3rd month, Janet surprised me by visiting. She wasn't on my approved visitor list, so I wasn't expecting her. I was curious, so I agreed to see her. I recalled our last talk and wondered why she was visiting. Sitting across from her, she said, "Orange isn't really your shade." "I've heard that before. Why are you here?" "I feel guilty," I replied. "Guilty for what?" she asked. For treating you poorly, I said. When was that? She inquired. The last time we spoke, I was in a bad mood and feeling down on men, but that wasn't an excuse for what I said. I'm sorry, Janet. I know it did upset you, but it's okay. I also wanted to thank you for something I shared. I gave you something to thank me for. Janet looked confused. You didn't realize it, but you did. A friend from college is a nurse at our doctor's office where Hal goes. Marcia tells me Hal has been discussing erectile issues with Dr. Marlin, it seems. His ability to perform has been affected, which is satisfying given what he did to me. You might find it interesting that your wife isn't benefiting from his cheating either, I told Janet, who seemed taken aback. Yes, definitely. We continued our conversation until she left, asking me to call her once I was out. I served 4 months in county jail but got released early due to overcrowding. Having served 2/3 of my sentence and being deemed non, I was released early despite my assault charge. Mike picked me up and we went to a weekly rate motel where I booked a room while I looked for an apartment. Mike updated me on recent developments. Amy isn't contesting the divorce, but she's fighting for custody, alimony, and even child. I don't think she'll succeed, but I'll request a hearing now that you're out. After that, it's just a waiting game. Mike asked what my plan is for the settlement check from Amy's employer. I'll keep it safe from Amy's grasp until the divorce is finalized. Now that you're free, you might be called to court over the payments you owe to Amy. I'll just say I couldn't pay her while I was in prison. They might say I could have arranged it or told her where I bank. There's no way she'd be able to access all the funds, which could work in your favor. Mike noted that, given all the deceit, and I wouldn't trust her not to take advantage if she could. The next morning I stopped by my workplace and asked Frank about job openings. He told me to get to work and not bother him with silly questions. That afternoon, I called Amy to arrange to see the kids, but she just laughed it off. She said she'd let me see them once she got some money. I ended the call and got in touch with Child Protection Services to explain that Amy was refusing to let me see the kids. I was told that she had the right to deny me access, and that your documentation shows you're not the biological parent, and that she holds maternal rights and visitation, if any, needs to be approved by the court. So you'll need to address the child support. If we want to get the order lifted, we'll have to go to court. You said I shouldn't count on gaining custody. I said I can't reveal our court recommendations. She said she was grateful, and then I called Amy to plan a visit with the kids at 7, bringing money along. I said I won't leave you alone with them, I'll be there. She said she'd be there. I put $500 in an envelope and got there right on time. Amy opened the door, saw the money and moved aside. I was really disappointed to see Bartram in the living room. He got up and left pretty quickly, which made me even more shocked. Brian and Susan were sitting on the couch. I was hoping for a happy reunion, but Susan's words made me realize that things were going to be different. Why did you hurt our father, Mom? Amy said that Halal was our real dad. I was frustrated and headed for the door. Amy laughed and said, "Come back soon." I grabbed the envelope and she said, "Rot in hell, deceitful strumpet." That's when things took a turn. I was brought before the court and told to pay. Amy, I was ordered to pay the original amounts for child support and alimony. I told the judge I'd sooner die than give money to a cheating woman. He warned me to comply or face contempt charges. I said it was the first right thing he'd said, and he then sentenced me to, I was given the choice of either $500 or 30 days. I chose the latter. On the 29th day, I returned to court. The judge asked if I'd changed my stance. I said that I wouldn't pay child support for kids that even the court admits aren't mine. CPS has also confirmed this regarding alimony. I'm okay with that, but I won't cover house payments. While my estranged wife is still seeing her boyfriend, remove him and I'll resume payments. You're claiming that CPS acknowledges you're not the father. The judge asked, Yes, they do. I'll adjourn this hearing to verify your CLA claim with CPS. He said as he left the courtroom, I'll catch up with you, Amy. She realized the child support decision might go in my favor and was furious. She'd been counting on another win against me the following day. I returned to court and the CPS report confirmed I wasn't the children's father and that Hal was living with Amy. Consequently, the judge nullified the child support and cut Amy's alimony by a third retroactively. I still had to settle the back payments and house expenses. The judge surprised everyone, particularly Amy, by ruling that since Miss Ludi had a boarder, She'd be responsible for utilities and house. I was ready to reject the ruling and take another 30 days, but I chose to comply. My reasoning was a bit twisted. Amy would be upset about the judge's decision, but seeing me return to jail might lift her spirits. I felt the need to deny her that satisfaction, while she might feel some joy in getting money from me, paying less than she anticipated, combined with the lack of child support and the smirk I'd give her. That would dampen her glee. The judge demanded the payment within 48 hours or he'd issue a warrant for my arrest. I gave Amy a smile as I left, which seemed to infuriate her, but it made my day back at the jail. I was processed out and then headed to a restaurant for a good meal. Afterwards, I went to my sister's to collect my belongings that she'd saved from my motel while I was incarcerated. We chatted. I also mentioned that Amy had influenced the kids. Megan advised me not to take it personally, they're just kids. Since you weren't around, Amy was their only influence. Young children are easily swayed, so you'll have an opportunity to speak to them, but that moment never came at the final court hearing. I was surprised to hear that Amy had been granted full custody. I wasn't even allowed to visit the children. According to the CPS report, both the mother and biological father believed that I would disrupt the children's lives. The biological father planned to marry Amy and form a family with her. The judge decided that it was best for the kids not to have me involved. The judge also ruled that I could stay in the family home until the kids turned 18. After that, the house would be sold with the proceeds divided between us. If Amy married before then, the house would go to her. It could be sold right away. The reduced alimony stayed in place, and I had to pay it for 3 years or until Amy remarried. Either way, I had to keep up with the payments. I was really upset when I left the courtroom and saw Amy. She gave me a little smile and flipped me off. I thought about it for about a week, and then I lost it. I started plotting. I'll admit my judgment was clouded, but I'd been wronged by Amy enough times that I just lost control. I terminated the homeowner's insurance and kept an eye on the house, waiting for the right moment. Days after canceling the insurance, Amy called the mortgage company. The company told me, "You canceled the insurance. I'm in a tight spot financially, so I'm looking to cut costs. I can get the same coverage for a better rate." The mortgage company mentioned Allstate. They said, "We need a policy on the house within 5 days, or they'll secure one and charge you." The person I spoke with said, "It would benefit us to get a policy since their insurance provider is expensive. I'll take care of it." 2 days after that call, my chance arrived. Amy left for work shortly after the kids headed to school, and at 8, once he was gone, I drove off in my Blazer. I opened the garage door using the remote and was surprised to find it worked. I drove in, took 2 5-gallon gasoline cans from my trunk, and entered the house. After thoroughly dousing the inside, I backed my car out and set the house on fire. I then headed to the airport, parked in long term. I parked my car for the duration and caught a flight to Panama City. I spent a month soaking up the sun and mingling with the ladies, some of whom I managed to impress on my final day in Panama City. I rented a safe deposit box at a bank and paid for 10 years up front. I'd emptied all my accounts before heading to Florida. I stashed the cash in that box. I figured I might face some jail time for my actions, but I didn't care. I'd left Amy high and dry with no insurance to cover the losses from the fire. She'd have nothing left. She might try to chase me down for it, but locked up or not, she wouldn't get a cent from me, even once. I got out, and she'd have a hard time getting any money from me. When I got back to town, I stopped by the shop to pick up my personal items. I apologized to Frank for leaving him in a tricky situation. He understood, having been through a rough divorce himself. He then asked if I'd got it all out of my system and was ready to return to work. I had to say no, explaining that I'd likely be going to jail when he asked why. I told him. He laughed, saying he wished he had the guts to do something similar to his ex. I reached out to Mike and invited him to lunch at Mari's. When he sat down, he warned me, "You've really stirred the pot this time. Everyone's gunning for you. You'd have been better off staying put. The judge said you were in contempt of court because he'd ordered you to maintain the house. The DA has a long list of charges against you, from arson to property destruction. Amy wants you strung up for her daily whipping sessions. But you might find some comfort in knowing that Amy lost her grip on keeping Bartram under a roof. How bad is it? How can they pin arson on me? It was my house, and I didn't commit insurance fraud. In fact, I canceled the insurance to prevent any claims. The mortgage company might be upset about losing their collateral, but I'm still responsible for the loan. I even made this month's payment just last week. As long as I keep up with the payments, they can't touch me. It was my property. I had the right to do what I wanted with it. In your opinion, maybe, but I can assure you the court won't see it that way. He was right after a month. After a lot of back and forth, I negotiated a plea deal with the state correctional facility at Albion. I got 3 years with good behavior, and I'd be eligible for parole halfway through. When parole was offered, I declined because I didn't want to subject myself to the legal system I'd grown to despise. I ended up serving 2.5 years inside. Mike, my sister, and even Frank visited regularly. Frank kept urging me to visit him once released, and Janet visited a couple of times, insisting I call her upon release while incarcerated. I also filed for bankruptcy, successfully discharging all debts except the one to the IRS. They took issue with my claiming house interest on my taxes, even though the house no longer existed. Even behind bars, the IRS demands their due, requiring tax filings and punishing income that doesn't comply with their rules. I'm sitting with Megan at Bud's bar, sipping a cold one. PBR. She asked about my plans. I'll be back at work, looking for an apartment and trying to rebuild some semblance of a social life. Do you think you'll visit the kids? I doubt it. Amy's had a big impact on them. Seeing the kids means seeing Amy. My first impulse would be to grab her by the throat. She doesn't want to see you either. She's still angry about you destroying everything she owned, but she's changed over the years. She genuinely regrets how things unfolded. She admits she loved you, and that her affair was purely physical. She never intended for you to find out. She's open to you having a relationship with Brian and Susan. I think we can all agree that Amy was being generous when she told Brian and Susan that I'm not their real father. She was just trying to do what you were doing out of spite. The kids got caught in the crossfire and ended up spending weekends with me. I'm sure they miss you, so I think you should try to reconnect with them. I can't. If you can, meet up with Amy and the kids at your place. We can try to get back together. I went to see Frank and he said I could go back to work when I'm ready. I asked for a week to get used to being free. I flew to Panama City to get my money from the safe deposit box and then came back home. I paid off my debt. I found an apartment with the RS and called Janet to ask her to dinner. I reconnected with my kids and started seeing them every other weekend. Janet and I went on several dates, but it became clear we were better off as friends. I found a new girlfriend and we're headed toward marriage. She must be amazing to take on. The challenge of being with me and my kids. Yes, I have custody of the kids now. Amy remarried, but her new marriage hit a snag when her husband caught her cheating. Unlike me, he didn't take photos. He grabbed a weapon and tragically ended both their lives. Since our state doesn't have capital punishment, he got a 20-year sentence. He got a year-to-life sentence. I send him a carton of cigarettes every month, along with a thank you note without Amy in the picture. I petitioned the court for custody and got it. Now the kids live with me. I guess there's truth to the saying,